for being here and for organizing this wonderful event. I think this is probably one of the first few events where you have both governments participating together. So in spite of us being separated geographically and politically and all that, I think there are some initiatives, there are some forums where actually we could come together and work for the benefit of the people at large. So wonderful initiative. Appreciate Parmesh Shah ji and his entire team from the World Bank. Andrew Scott, Mr. Raymond Peter, Mr. Satyanarayana, Shashi Bhushan Garu, and our CEO Sir, Mr. Murli, my friends from the media, and all the dignitaries present in front of the dais. As you all know, in the last 90 odd days of Telangana being carved out and Telangana government coming into being, we have done something very interesting with regard to data. Our Chief Minister is a firm believer of the philosophy that all sorts of nonsense flies in the absence of good data. He believes that good data is imperative to actually build, plan, and actually have constructive programs going forward. In fact, the two things which we are proud about, which we are happy about, which have been done, which was a departure from the convention of the past, is one, we started out with what was called a bottom-up planning approach. My village, my plan. We wanted to empower, as Parmesh Shah rightly said. I think very few governments have had this distinction of having a minister head both extremes of the spectrum. The information technology on the one end, which is very urban centric and which is considered a little bit of, which has got this elite tag actually. And on the other hand, you have Panchayat Raj and rural development, which is the other end of the spectrum, which is where the majority of this country resides. So I have that unique distinction of leading both departments, and my very capable and very senior secretary, Mr. Raymond Peter, has been guiding me through the travails of, and how do we mix these two up and ensure that better connectivity and better information is better citizen services are offered to the people at large. And the two things that, as I mentioned, we are happy and proud about. One is the fact that we started out with a bottom-up planning approach called My Village, My Plan, My City, My Plan. We wanted to empower the citizens to actually come up with their set of requirements, with their set of needs, with their set of sort of a wish list, to actually let the government know right on the top as to what it is that they would like to see in their village happening. And the second thing we also started doing, and in fact, we got a lot of flack for that. In fact, I should tell you this because the media created a huge furor over this, and there was a lot of skepticism, there was a lot of cynicism, lots of criticism. When we started analyzing the data that we had, as a new state, we wanted to just take stock of the situation. We wanted to analyze what we have and what we need to plan, etc. We realized, and we came across some staggering statistics. I'm sure my secretary will elaborate on that. I'll just give you a couple of examples. One, the fact that we only had, again, I'm going back and falling back on the data that we had in the past. The fact that there are about 84 lakh households in the state is a statistic that we had on one hand. And on the other hand, we had that while there were 84 lakh households, we had more than 1 crore 7 lakh ration cards. The fair price shops, they go by these ration cards. I'm sure most of you all know here. That's the one staggering statistics which obviously was unfathomable, which we could not get around to understanding. The second thing obviously was, again, 84 lakh households, and successive governments over the last 20-25 years claim to have built about 55 lakh houses, new houses. And then there is still the demand for new ration cards and new houses, and still the urge, and the drive from the government's side to actually do more and more in these two areas. So this is something that we could not get around to understand. We wanted to understand it deeply, not just these two issues, but we wanted to actually plan better. And that's exactly why we went out and we did something. I think it should be recorded in the Guinness Book of World Records as well, because it is something that has been never attempted or achieved. We actually used the entire Telangana government's workforce, more than 4 lakh employees, and we went out aggressively and we completed a household survey in one single day, and which actually brought about a fantastic, huge data mine. In fact, as recently as yesterday, our Principal Secretary, Mr. Raymond Peter, had conducted a workshop on trying to understand the various usages of this wonderful data bank that we are sitting on right now. And the range of suggestions we got from various experts and various departments and various NGOs was staggering. In fact, he'll elaborate more on that. As Parmesh Shah said, I think there are two or three big buzzwords that are being mentioned repeatedly these days from anybody we keep meeting. One is big data, the other is data analytics. These are the two big things I think the world is talking about now. The IT world has sort of fallen in love with this whole idea of big data analytics, and so lots of companies in Silicon Valley and elsewhere are also talking about it. So on the whole, I would obviously, coming back to our discussion, we all know that we're in the middle of a huge data revolution that's sweeping the world today. A high-level UN panel on the post-development agenda called for, and I quote, data revolution for sustainable development with a new international initiative to improve the quality of statistics and information available to people and governments. Data must also enable us to reach the neediest and find out whether they are receiving essential services. This is exactly what we set out to achieve when we started off with our initiative on the household survey. We wanted to ensure that the government's services, the government's plans actually reach the neediest, actually the essential services are tailored and catered and planned according to the needs of the citizens who are right at the bottom of the rung. I'll bet with anyone in the room that we are part of this revolution without us knowing it, or without us actually not being in the know-how of it. We all know it. Some of us know it, some of us don't. We all know that data actually increasingly drives our decisions, such as where we live, where our children go to school, which hospitals we use, and what services we actually use. It also helps us navigate from point A to point B. In fact, I used to wonder, when I lived in the United States for about 7 years, that's exactly the time, I think, when the Yahoo Maps started coming into being. And when I used to drive from point A to point B, I lived in the tri-state area for a very long period of time. When I used to drive from Connecticut to New York or Connecticut to New Jersey, I used to just pull up my Yahoo Maps and I used to just be navigated by it. And I always used to wonder what people did when they actually did not have the Yahoo Maps. And I asked a colleague of mine, I asked him, how did you commute in this complicated web that you have created called the National Highway System? How do you navigate from point A to point B? He simply said, we used the good old maps, I had my wife sitting right next to me, and she used to tell me how to go about it, and she used to be my navigator. This is what he told us. So yes, data increasingly drives us today from point A to point B, and data is used by governments obviously to make decisions on our behalf, to plan our operations, and also help them be accountable. So what's more, attitudes to data are also changing. People used to hoard data because they thought the value was in the data. But I think the real value is, and all the governments are actually increasingly realizing this, it's not data that makes you powerful, it's how you use it. In fact, how you plan with it, how do you actually accomplish, how you actually set certain targets for yourself, and how you go about achieving them. I think that's what makes it useful, and that's exactly what our government is set out to do. And what is more important, I think data does not wear out by use. Data does not wear out by dissemination. I think it's Thomas Jefferson who said, he who receives, I quote, he who receives an idea from me, receives instruction himself without lessening mine, as he who lights his taper at mine receives light without darkening me. So data actually empowers not just the beholder of it, but also the person or the persons or the people who actually are at the other end of the spectrum, who actually are receiving it and who are actually empowered by using it. So what is open data? That is exactly that is what the topic of this seminar is, the subject of our seminar. Open data is something that's at the heart of this data revolution that is sweeping the world today. Open data is about letting anyone reuse data for any purpose, subject obviously to an acknowledgement of the source. So, like I said, our secretary's workshop yesterday with the huge data mine that we have through this household survey, lots of people in fact are reaching out to us. Lots of people, even on my social media page, are reaching out to me saying, why don't you actually put this up in a public domain so that we can use it? Obviously we can't keep it all, because there's some confidential information that we have to, that we've actually that we swore to keep secret. So therefore, besides what we have is classified and secret, I think the rest of it can be used for multiple purposes. So that's something that we would be considering, but obviously no decisions have been made yet. Open government data is already being used for many purposes. For the first thing obviously is it improves transparency. In fact, as you all know, our country has what is called the Right to Information Act. And Right to Information Act has certainly empowered the common man of this country in terms of bringing in more transparency into the governance process in terms of making the government servants more accountable to the people at large. So I think that's a wonderful thing. It's one of the accomplishments of the previous governments, which definitely we believe are have to be continued at any cost. The other obvious good that comes from open data is improving public services, giving people a greater understanding and input of the choices that are important to them. The third thing, obviously, what open data does, it stimulates economic growth and it fuels creation of new businesses, such as I just mentioned, the big data analytics. The sort of country that India is, a country of 1.2 billion, the opportunities are huge and the opportunities are many. So I think these are the three wonderful opportunities that we can look at. And the final point, which is the main focus of our today's seminar, is that reviewing the latest evidence across the world, we keep hearing that McKinsey has been estimating the potential global price of about 3 trillion a year and exploring the nature of the companies already using open data as part of their business model. So the business opportunity is there, and the governments actually can go after it, because governments actually are owners of huge data banks. So can the private enterprises, obviously. And now coming to the whole idea of open data and the World Bank, let me say why open data is important to us. I think Mr. Parmesh Shah pretty much put it in perspective, but we are clearly focused as government of Telangana, clearly focused on eliminating rural poverty, and our Society for Eliminating Rural Poverty is headed by Mr. Murli, who is sitting here. We've worked closely with with World Bank on a lot of initiatives. In fact, we are closely working with them on the TRIGP program, the Rural Inclusive Growth Project as well. What this whole idea of open data means in eliminating rural poverty and in alleviating the issues in rural areas, obviously is, it means addressing development challenges like promoting growth and jobs, increasing private sector investment and business climate, improving governance and public services, and addressing issues of gender inclusiveness as well. These are all the things that we are likely to accomplish if we work together. Open data will also be important if and only if it contributes to solving these challenges. There are a lot of things that we can talk about, but I would like to close out with this. Today's event is obviously about sharing knowledge and ideas about how open data can empower rural development and inclusive growth in Andhra Pradesh and in Telangana state. And I want it to be challenging as well. We want this seminar to actually explore the possibilities and ask the questions. Is open data an opportunity as real for the developing countries like India as it is for the developed nations in the West? Is it really a gold mine for development, as some have actually claimed, or as all the reports have been claiming? What interventions are needed by the government to stimulate and support the realization of the economic and social benefits of open data for all citizens? And why does open data matter to the rural poor? These are the questions that really need to be answered. While we have some answers, these are all at a very high level and very in very nascent stage at this point in time. So as we continue this opportunity working together to explore more on how open data can be used to eliminate poverty in rural areas, I request you all to come together so that we can make sure that open data actually contributes to reducing rural poverty and boosting shared prosperity in our two states, both Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. The possibilities are huge. Let us seize them, let us work together, and I guarantee you this, our government, the government of Telangana, is extremely committed to transparency, to accountability, to ensuring that the citizens actually receive the best of services. And if open data actually provides a platform for achieving any of these set targets, we'll be more than happy to support. Thank you once again, and I laud the World Bank for this wonderful initiative. Thank you.